Welcome to the Invigor Medical Podcast. Today's going to be a little bit different. As everybody out there watching knows, if you've been watching the show for any period of time, you know that I'm a huge Andrew Huberman Labs fanboy.
Fanboy. I'm so glad you said fanboy, because if you didn't, I was going to.
I mean, what is it? Know thyself?
I think that's absolutely it. And I mean, I'll be honest, I really enjoy Huberman and listening to his stuff, but you for sure bring him up way more. Probably about the same amount of times as I bring up being a single mom.
Hey, we all got our thing. But so actually, before we get rolling, I was going to tell you a story, but I wanted to save it for the audience to hear as well. You know, and you've seen me at the beginning of these podcast episodes. We have a pretty good production here, but every single time we show up, there always seems to be something slightly wrong.
Oh, every time, especially if it's a Monday.
Especially if it's a
Monday.
Rule. Especially if it's a Monday,
Yes.
And especially if it's like an early morning podcast. Today, we had a guy come in and fix everything up, but last night I had a dream that I showed up to the podcast studio, and not only was there something wrong, it's like everything was disassembled.
Oh my gosh.
Like this table was moved over there, the cameras were taken down, the monitors were down, the TV was down, and like I didn't panic, but I was just like, every time, are you kidding me? Every time I've got to come in here and fix this. So I'm very grateful that we have things all lined up, all set up. So.
And I wonder if part of that was because we haven't really done an episode like this before, and so maybe your subconscious was like just a little extra worried, which is ironic considering it's way worse when it happens when we have a guest online waiting for us and we can't hear them, and I'm just sitting here like, hello. We'll talk to you soon.
I gotta say, you do a very good job with that.
Oh, especially sitting here awkwardly.
Well, more so just like when the audio does come on, you do a very good job of conversating with them and making sure they feel comfortable. So I think you do a phenomenal job.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But the other thing is, I just found this clip this morning, but that I wanted to show you that just made me laugh.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull it up here on the iPad and I'm gonna let you watch it here.
Okay. What do you know? It's Huberman.
It's Huberman.
I'll push play.
Look, Derek's not a scientist by training, but he's done an immense service to the world.
That's all I want to hear, man. That's all I want to hear. That's all I want to hear. He's not a scientist by training, but he's done an immense benefit to the world. Like, thank you, Mr. Huberman. I really wanted to hear that.
I want to say something, and we might have to cut it out. But did you save that to your Spank Bank album?
Oh my gosh.
We might have to edit that one.
Oh my gosh.
We talk about ED on this show and medication, so sometimes it just takes a little something extra.
I'll tell you what. When I heard that this morning, I'm just like, dude, this is. So he's actually talking. Perfect. He's actually talking about a guy named Derek from. He has a whole channel called More Plates, More Dates, talking about fitness, and he's actually very scientific.
Okay.
Which is why he's done an immense service.
He's not a scientist, but he's done an immense service to the world.
Yeah. So,
me personally, Derek, I feel that way. There's many times we're sitting here, and I love having the conversations and asking questions, to the doctors and authors and experts that we have on. It's super fun. But inevitably, you always have a level of detail and, dare I say, nerdiness that you get to offer and add to the questions in the conversation that I'm just like, sweet, now we sound extra smart, and I'm grateful you're here.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, so today what I kind of wanted to dive into is I recently took my love for Huberman to the next level, and I was like, he has a live event, and I ended up going, and it was a phenomenal experience. It was over in Chicago. And I got to go visit my brother for a week, which was a
super fun.
Great experience. Got to have some deep dish pizza.
It's a must when you're in Chicago.
I didn't get the Chicago dog, which I really wanted to. But there was actually another thing that I love almost as much, if not more, than Andrew Huberman, which is Nando's chicken.
Okay.
So Nando's chicken is a peri-peri chicken. It's a South African company.
Okay.
So I ate there almost every week when I was in South Africa.
I'm so hungry. You're talking
and
about chicken.
It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I got a whole chicken, and it was marinated in this sauce.
I did see something about your post about a whole chicken, and I had no idea what you were talking about. I was just like, maybe it's Huberman lingo. I don't know. I thought maybe it was an inside joke that I was never gonna get because I'm not enough of a nerd.
No, this is I was posting that for my South Africans, and anyways. Nando's Peri Peri. If you're ever in Chicago, check them out. Phenomenal food. Phenomenal. Anyways, but I kind of wanted to unpack what the live event was like, because when we were talking about this a little bit earlier, I was looking for more info about the live event beforehand, and there wasn't too much. I mean, Huberman has like a short segment on his blog that talks about, like, this is what you can expect, but there's not much to it.
And you're a guy who likes to know what to expect.
Yeah.
See, I have friends so I'm a huge concert goer. I love going to concerts. In fact, if my friends are going and it's not death metal, I'm probably like, I'll just go. Like, no. Yeah. But I have friends who will look up the set list before, and you're one of those people.
Well, we went to go see Mumford & Sons, who's my favorite band. And like the whole week beforehand, I was literally consuming all the content I possibly could that Mumford & Sons was putting out, so that way I could like build up the anticipation, and like it was amazing.
Yeah, so that I'll do. I'll listen to the music, but like looking up the set list so I know what they're playing, absolutely not. No way am I doing that. Like, I want to be fully present in the experience, not like a song plays and I'm like, ooh, that means this song's next, because now I'm not present then in that moment. And so I'm like, and they'll be like, ooh, let's play the playlist of what the set list is going to be. And I'm like, I will kick you out of my car if you do that. This is not happening. Sometimes I won't even watch the preview for a movie if I'm like, because I like to be surprised. And I have a mind that naturally is like putting together puzzle pieces to see what comes next. And so I have to counteract that because I just want to be present. So a live event, I would just be like, I love Andrew Huberman, let's go. But you're like, how do we know what's going to happen, what to expect? So if you're like Derek, you're in luck, because now through this episode, you're going to get a snapshot of what the live events for Huberman look like.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was looking it up, I saw that a lot of people actually had similar questions. They're like, how is it different than the podcast? What is the Q&A segment like? Does he talk about anything unique? And so I kind of wanted to cover each one of those briefly. And I don't know, I don't necessarily want to like bore people with all the details, but like,
well, let me just ask you this: for your experience, how was it different than the podcast, other than you got to gaze upon his beautiful face and amazing greatness?
It was incredible.
In the flesh.
That was incredible.
Right. I can only imagine. Did you get like tingly all over?
Yeah.
I feel tingly just imagining it. So.
Well, it's like when I was booking the event, it's like I could have just bought a regular ticket or the VIP ticket, which was like slightly closer to the stage. In fact, I think there's a picture that the Huberman Lab crew took, and I zoomed in on it, and I'm like, I highlighted myself on it. Like, I'm right there.
Was this your face?
Yeah, basically. It was
just
like, oh my gosh. Yeah, like.
No, but for somebody that really loves the podcast, loves everything that Huberman does, but's like, what's the point of going to the live event if it's all the same stuff? What stood out to you as being like how it was different comparatively?
Yeah, so there's something. I think Huberman, the reason why my affinity for him, and I went with my brother, is he goes on tangents all the time. And like anybody that has a conversation with me knows that like I love to like just go down a rabbit hole and like
take the road less traveled.
Exactly. And then like, it's like, how did we get here again? Oh yeah, that's right. And then you have to go back to the original thing. And so he has a set list, right? Of beats that he follows, but he diverts from it all the time. So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference. If you have listened to a lot of episodes that he's put out, honestly, a lot of the stuff he's talking about is very similar to what he says there. But I think that the thing that is really unique were some of the specific stories that he shared, and you get kind of more of this insight with him. And I like had a lot more of I felt like I had more of a connection with him.
Yeah.
So like the first story he told was talking about how, or one of the first stories he told was talking about how when he was a little kid, like, when he was, in elementary school, he would study all these things about animals and like medieval weaponry and, all these things. And like in 5th grade, I actually did a whole school project on like medieval weaponry.
Oh
and
my
so
gosh.
like when he said that, I'm like, bro,
So
don't even go there. Like,
we're the same human. Oh my God.
it's like, okay, we're going to talk about trebuchets and ballistas and all these things is going to be, and claymores, bro. Like I was nerding out.
Oh my gosh.
But like, so he made this arrangement with his teacher. And it was more so the teacher like saying like, if I don't do this, he's not going to shut up in my class. He's like, he carved out a 10-minute chunk almost every single day for Huberman just to come up and like lecture to the class what he learned about the day previous. And because he kind of had that platform, it then essentially that drive that he had ever since he was a little kid essentially then turned into what the podcast is today. And so like hearing that was just super incredible. Like it's just such a cool
It
story.
sounds like the live event kind of gave you an opportunity to see and understand more of who Andrew is, apart from just being the Huberman lab.
I think so.
And kind of like this more full picture of like a person and a story and past and history. Because I know he kind of references some of that in episodes, but I feel like so much of it is just like very technical and very deep. Like I have to be in the right headspace when I listen to his podcast, because there's so much detail within everything that he's saying or his guests are saying. You're just like blown away by how smart they are and how much they know. That I'll catch myself, even if I'm driving, I like keep hitting the reverse 30-second button on my screen because I'm like, whoa, pause. Play that again, because I'm not gonna get that, you know. So it sounds kind of cool because me personally, I love understanding what makes people tick, why their minds work the way that they do, how they got from here to there. And so that's one of my favorite things about diving. Like when I got the memoir from my all-time favorite musical artist, and it was just like incredible to understand this, even though I deeply admire, borderline worship everything that she does. This whole picture story was just incredible. Brandy Carlisle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very
Not
cool.
a lot of people super know who she is, but she's gotten really big. But that's another story, and definitely not on topic for Invigor Medical.
Man, well, yeah. So that was the first story that I thought was really cool. Another one that he brought up that I think he talked about very briefly on the podcast, but like he went into all the nitty gritty details. He talked about how he went to go see Rick Rubin, and honestly, I didn't really know who Rick Rubin was before, but he was a producer for like almost everybody that you could think of, like
musical producer.
Musical producer.
Okay, I'm like Rubin sounds familiar.
Yeah, so like he's done productions for like the Beastie Boys, Adele, Eminem, like all genres. Is it Slayer? Like literally every single kind of genre that you can think of, he's been a producer
That's
for.
wild.
So yeah, it like incredibly creative guy. Huberman, Andrew went to go visit him at his home, and like the first thing they did, he's like, yeah, come on in, we're gonna do an ice bath. And he's like, okay, great, we're doing ice bath. This is awesome. And then it's like, the ice bath is like the size of this. No, it's smaller than this table, right? And it's like, and we're gonna, lock our legs together and be like super close quarters with each other. It's like, okay, like that's. And then the next thing he's like, so, and then we just close our eyes and sit back. He's like, no, you're gonna stare at me right in the eyes.
Whoa.
For 5 minutes.
That just made me feel like tingly and a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
Like somebody you're just meeting and who's like actually a living legend in the music world.
Yeah. And
that's
so
intense.
It's just like, what in the world? And so that was a really funny story, but it's just like immediately after he talked about how Rick Rubin, like during the whole day, would literally just spend swaths of time. And of course, if you're incredibly successful and have lots of money and you're able to do this, but like he would just spend tons of time just basically sitting on the couch doing nothing. And Huberman kind of like poked at him like, what are you doing? Like you're this incredibly successful guy, like what are you doing? And he's like, my body looks very dormant right now, but my mind is super active. And so it's like he was actually saying, this is what allows me to be creative, is intentionally carving out these spaces of very calm, where my body is very calm, but I allow my mind to like go wherever it needs to go and do whatever it needs to do. And so then Huberman like emphasized like there's lots of great thinkers and great people that have done this throughout history. And he brought up the example of Albert Einstein, that like Albert Einstein would basically walk, he would pace to think about things, but then he would do these things like where he would essentially, I forgot exactly what he called it, but essentially he would just like stop in one spot and stand in one spot for like 5-10 minutes, like frozen.
Wow.
Like almost like he had like some sort of stupor or something.
Right.
But like as he's doing that, like,
his mind's just going.
Theory of relativity getting calculated,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's an interesting thing to think about, because I think, one thing that many, many people struggle with is sleep.
Yeah.
And for me, if I'm struggling to sleep, it's never really an issue of physical exhaustion. I'm not being physically tired, but my mind won't stop.
Yeah.
And so I think about all day long, like how packed the days are, how many things are going on, how many things I'm constantly thinking about that are rolling around in my head, but how often I just sit and I'm still and I'm doing nothing and let my mind wander. Because I was just thinking about this the other day. I remember when I was a teenager and I had this like Papasan chair I got from Pier 1, like one of those satellite chairs. It was like my prized possession. Like I bought it myself. It was really expensive. And I would just go and sit in my room and just sit and like think and daydream and like just do that. And I did that so frequently. And I was just thinking the other day, I'm like, man, I don't really do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like if I'm sitting, like the TV's on, or I'm on my phone, or I'm talking to the kids, or, you know, even if I go out on my patio and, you know, for quiet time in the morning, it's like I have the book, I have the list. I'm probably going to try to do like 10 minutes of meditation, but then I'm like focusing on, you know, a word
Very
or one thought or
specific.
feeling.
Yeah.
And that, when you were just saying that, made me think like, well, that kind of makes sense when I'm struggling to sleep, maybe, because when I finally lay down in bed, it's the first time of the day that that part of my mind is having the freedom to go. It's like,
Yeah.
I haven't exercised that part of my mind yet. And so it's just going to go. And even if I do fall asleep, it's going to keep going.
Yeah,
And
it's
dude,
just
I
running.
have some wacky dreams, real in the subconscious mind. And I remember my dreams, and I'm not really grateful for that. And so it's like, that just made me think of that, how interesting and how important it probably is for us to all make time for our minds to wander and to dream. And I wonder what that would feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I had the exact same thought. You know, like so I served a 2-year mission for my church down in South Africa, and there would be very intentional times where it's like you're supposed to spend this hour of chunk of time studying, you know, the X amount of scriptures or whatever, you know, and like I remember during those times it was just like an hour of silence, and like each day it was so different of like whether or not I would be engaged or I'd be like, I don't really want to do this day, but it was carved out and part of the day. And I feel like some of my deepest thoughts and some of my like most insightful periods were during that chunk of time. And I was just reflecting on that afterwards, and I'm just like, I need to carve out more time like that.
Yeah.
Where I'm just able to, just like you say, like allow my mind to just wander and daydream. And
Yeah.
I specifically remember, this is a bit of a tangent, but like it's similar to like you sitting in that chair and just daydreaming. Like I remember laying down on the couch and listening to Pink Floyd. which album was it? I think it was like Wish You Were Here. And there's some tracks on that are freaking psychedelic, man.
Yeah, right?
And it's like I'm just staring out the window and I'm watching, it was a fall day and the trees were blowing, and I'm just like, dude, this is incredible.
Right.
And just letting your mind wander. Anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but like, I think that in our busy world, it is so easy to get caught up in just saying, how can I optimize? How can I optimize? How can I optimize? And there is immense value in just stepping back and letting it.
Well, and that even our downtime is somehow still focused on something.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing something, even if it's, you know, having fun or watching TV or whatever. And that's not to say those things are bad, but to create the time for your mind to wander and just, you know, a little walkabout in your brain.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So actually, I think that ties in really well. And obviously, like, Huberman crafted this whole thing to kind of like flow together. The whole event is called the Brain Body Contract. And so kind of, I think what he means by that is like, he talked about how the nervous system and the body are connected, right? And we all know the mind-body connection, right? He's talked about on his podcast multiple times where it's like, I don't really like that phrase because it's like, what is your mind if it's not a part of your body? And what is your body if it's not a part of your mind? It's like the nervous system is part of your body. And so then he talked about like the brain body contract is like different things that you can do, very specific protocols that you can actually perform to change your state of mind in real time. Right.
Okay.
And so,
I'm listening. I'm interested.
Yeah. And so it was very interesting. And like he talked about there's like it being a spectrum. He's like, you have levels of alertness. On this end, you have being dead. You know, where you're in the grave.
Not alert.
Right. To being in a coma, to like sleeping, to being partly awake, to just waking up, to, you know, going about your day, to being alert, to being in a panic attack, all the way down. And like, there are things that you can do all along that spectrum to either move yourself up or move yourself down.
Okay.
And so he talked about a lot of the things that I think that a lot of people are familiar with that are trending in social media a lot is like ice baths. He was like, I don't know how I got pinpointed as like the ice bath guy. It's like all I've really recommended is like cold showers, but like somehow I'm like lumped in with Wim Hof now.
Yeah.
You know? And so he was commenting on that, and I thought that was pretty humorous. But like essentially, some of the most powerful ways that we can change our state of mind is through our breath, through just breathing. And so he talked about the physiological sigh, which is essentially 2 deep breaths in through the nose and then 1 long exhale through the mouth. On record, he is saying like this is the most powerful way to calm
and regulate the nervous
yourself
system.
down and regulate your nervous system that I know of. And he's willing to basically stand by that.
Wow.
That is the most powerful way to bring down your autonomic arousal as quickly as possible.
Wow.
And he's like, if anybody knows otherwise, send me the studies, send me, tell me where I can go to look and find this. But like, that is the most powerful way to calm down.
Wow.
He then talked about obviously cold showers. He also talked about hyperventilation. That's a incredibly powerful way to increase your level of alertness just by like essentially
right.
just breathing like that will increase your alertness greatly and will basically put you in a state of mind. So if you're trying to wake up or you're trying to be able to focus intently on like a project that you're trying to get done, by breathing rapidly, it will increase your heart rate. It will make you more alert and more attuned to what you're doing. So it's really incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy how much we hear about breath work, and there's so many different ways to breathe. It's so silly because it seems like one of the most simplest things we could possibly do to really help regulate and, calm down and get where we need to be. But I don't know why it's not. It's funny because I usually will find myself only do that when I like feel kind of like anxious in my chest, but it's always reactive. And so I wonder what it would be like if I just had a daily practice of breath work.
Yeah.
Just incorporating it into the day. Because there's different ones that I do, like box breathing, which is 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out.
Yeah.
I've done like 4, 7, 8, which is 4 in, hold for 7, exhale for 8. And then the 2 inhale, what do they call it? Where you just said, I feel like there's a specific
the
term.
Physiological sigh.
Maybe, where it's like, and that big one.
Yep.
Yeah. So I now do that and I incorporate it with the 4, 7. So instead of doing the 4 inhale, I'll do the 2 with the big one and then I'll hold for 7 and I'll exhale for 8 because I read or heard at some point that the signal that you're sending to your body when you take longer to exhale than you did to hold it or breathe, then it actually sends a signal to your body that like we're safe and we don't need this extra air. And so it like calms you down.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Just even doing that, I feel like a little more awake and a little more alert, right? But we don't work it into like a daily practice. But even in like, not so much in Western culture, right? Breath work is something that's huge, and in a lot of other countries that are steeped in more ancient traditions, which, we're still a baby country, right?
Yeah.
And we're also very much the go, all about the mind and, mind over matter kind of ideas.
Right.
But breath work is something that is just, centuries old that, I have a friend who spent time living over in Bali and Vietnam, and who talked about, hours long breath workshops that he went to, which just kind of blew my mind. And people having like traumatic experiences, like healing within the process through breath work, which is just mind blowing to me. And, there's some things that like, it's like you can maybe explain a little bit through science and others that maybe you can't. And then that goes into like the brain and the body, the contract. And like, we always talk about the mind and how do you quantify the mind. And I was just thinking as you were talking about that, I'm like the mind really is like a whole body thing. It's not just something that's in our heads.
Yeah, well, and it's funny you bring up a couple of things that he also touched on during it. And I think that this is one really cool aspect that you get from the live event that you don't necessarily get from his podcast. He actually opened up a little bit about like spirituality and like how it affects it and all these things. You could tell he didn't really want to dive too deep into it.
Right.
But like he talked about different practices like yoga nidra, which is like a very meditative and type of meditation, or what is it? A very calming state of meditation where it's able to kind of like help you relax. He also talked about like hypnosis. And what's interesting is something that he did is, and that he's trying to like be a leader on, I guess you could say, is trying to rebrand some of these ancient practices to have more modern or scientific names.
Okay.
Right. And like his thought behind it is essentially like there are people out there that if they hear the word meditation or something like yoga nidra or hypnosis, there's a lot of baggage. That's not necessarily the right word, but there's a lot of context around that people are like, oh, that's woo woo. It's not actually going to improve my life or X, Y, or Z. Or like hypnosis, people think about stage hypnosis.
Right. Or they see like the old cartoons with the swirls in the eyeballs and there's like a snake coming out of a basket or,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so a big part of what he's trying to do is like, instead of yoga nidra, he's, and you can find his, this on YouTube, he's created something that's called a non-sleep deep rest protocol. So non-sleep, deep rest is essentially, it's just meditation, but it only focuses on very tactile and physiological things. It's not like talking about like, here's your mantra or
Right.
anything along those lines, so that it can be more
Accessible?
accessible to anyone, regardless of what your religious or spiritual beliefs are.
Sure.
He makes it accessible to anybody to be able to utilize these tools. And so I think that's very interesting.
I think it's I think it's great. Also, because me personally, being raised like in a very fundamentalist Christian point of view, anything that was more of sort of that. I don't even know how to say it, but like the way it was viewed was like almost like this Eastern magic, woo voodoo. Definitely dangerous spiritually, right? It's being careful about opening yourself up to the influence of not God,
Right,
know, and I definitely don't see it that way now, but I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like what he's trying to combat is, a complete dismissal or rejection of something that is, clearly so impactful for overall health and well-being, simply because of maybe what it's called or where it originated, but there's so much truth in all of that, and it seems really sad for people to be kept from it because it's because of what it's titled or where it came from, when there's even scientific research to back up the fact of the impact it can have.
So I think that it was very cool to be able to see him dive into that. And then also like, I guess I did say he talked about spirituality, and kind of like recently he did an episode with Lex Friedman where he also kind of opened up more about like, does he pray? What is the, what is like his views on that? And he stayed very neutral on it. But he was like, I see that people that can find a lot of value in that, and that being able to essentially take a situation that you can't control and just being able to let go of it, like there is a lot of value and power that can come from that. And so like it was cool to hear him just touch on it. You could tell he didn't want to spend too much time on it,
right? But
like it was a very cool experience just to hear him talk about it.
Well, and and I do consider myself to be spiritual. I'm like a lot of people who grew up in a Christian faith or others, like religion kind of is a turn-off word for me, but being spiritual. But I've often wondered, as I've, begun reconstructing my faith and my spirituality over the years, and kind of seen all of that, like taking a step back and, an outside perspective, the way that we view the way people step into spirituality or their religion, and it's like a bunch of cockamamie, you're convincing yourself of this or that or whatever, and like an atheist view or an agnostic view might be like, well, you're just duping yourself and that's ridiculous and you're just being illogical and blah 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 blah. And I started thinking, I'm wondering, well, let's say it is, let's say it's all BS, let's say you're making it up in your mind and it's your own way to self-soothe, and what are any of the practices, that we're doing mentally and to calm ourselves? I mean, some of them are actually scientific, if not a way for us to find a way to live a happier, fuller life. And if you can find ways to do that that are not harmful to yourself or to others, and that includes, a faith and belief that helps you step into that, then like, okay, like they probably having a lot more peace than a lot of other people are having. Do you know what I mean? It just feels sad to me. And it's like, everybody has a different path that they're finding that. And my belief is that like, we're actually really more on the same path than we think we are. Same highways, different lanes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's just, it's kind of a hard thought for me to fully articulate, because I feel like I'm still kind of developing it. But, even as I've like reattached to my own faith and spirituality, that is something that I've thought about sometimes. I'm like, am I being dumb here? But it's like, no, it's something that you can feel internally. And if I'm praying out loud, I'm like, I'm not even sure what I'm picturing here or who this is, but what I know is I feel more peace and I feel more calm and I have more clarity, and what I'm focusing on tends to expand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I totally get that.
Anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent sidetrack, but I think one of my favorite things about Huberman kind of diving in a little bit spiritually, and I would be very curious to know more about that, as I'm sure many people would, which is probably why he avoids the topic, is because there's so much that's scientific based about what he does, but there are also so many things that he, talks about and practices scientifically that are on the edge of like that intangible quality of what a practice is rooted in or what it's achieving, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And which is where it kind of gets a little bit loose and left up for debate. And clearly he likes things that make sense and, there's answers for him that he can explain.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people feel more security in having certainty. And that's why it's difficult to step into the things that have a little bit of like, why does this work? And why does this, why does stepping into this practice have the impact that it does? And we want concrete, solid answers. And I think that there's so much freedom and beauty in stepping into the mysticism of life.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. And, it's funny that essentially it's like, there's a frontier between what's known and what's unknown. And, it's as human beings, we want to continually march that frontier forward. It was funny in the Q&A, somebody asked a question that he answered that was like, are you going to be doing more research on, or is there, what is the value of like doing scientific research on like religiosity and like spiritual experiences? And he's like, honestly, I don't think that there's too much to be gained from like trying to put probes on someone's brain and then have them pray and do X, Y, and Z. He's like, there are just things that we can't understand. And so I thought that was very interesting that like there's a line that he draws that's like, there are things that are clearly in our wheelhouse that we can focus on that can provide us immense value. And then there's other things where we just got to say it's a black box and, we can see, we can just trust that that whatever it is, it seems to be helping a lot of people.
Right. And part of me wonders if they're like, I feel a little bit of disappointment if we had everything figured out.
Yeah.
Like, right. Isn't that like kind of the whole point of this journey is like, it is the journey. There never is an arrival. There's always something that you can be curious about and not fully know and understand.
Yeah.
And like how much freedom there is to just be like, well, I'm never going to know that. And especially for Huberman, who like clearly is self-proclaimed and from anybody on the outside looking in as a guy who likes to know things and understand things and make sense of them, for him to kind of take that clear stance of like, there's things we're never going to understand and that's the way it should be. I think that's really cool.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of segue into the question and answers. I submitted a couple of questions.
Oh, I bet you did.
Right?
Did he pick one?
No, he did not.
Oh.
Unfortunately, so just to give everyone that's out there an idea, if you were to go to one of these live events, I looked at mine at the because it was like Slido. He uses this app called Slido.
Oh, I was like, I don't know what that is.
And it's like you basically, it's an app that you there's a code that pops up on the screen. You punch it in, and you have access to this specific event.
Sure.
So I submitted my questions, and then after the fact, I saw how many questions got submitted, and it was like 600 questions. Right. I think he addressed like maybe 10 of them, which he did a very good job with and like moved through them as quickly.
Were they at least good questions?
Yeah, they were great questions. Yeah, they were great questions. And so, and like one of them being like, what is the value of studying spiritual experiences?
Gotcha.
And so like, I definitely appreciated that. Two of the big ones that I had that I asked him was like, what is the process? And this is just because I love what we do here at the Invigor Medical Podcast. I'm like, how do you make your podcast so good?
Yeah.
Like, what is the process that you take to like make your podcast so good? So I can take notes and try to emulate that as much as possible, right? So I asked that, and didn't get anywhere. And then the other one was he did a Ask Me Anything, where he talked about peptides, which is a big thing that we do here at Invigor Medical. And he specifically said like there are some research about peptides being able to help with certain mental health conditions, and then he just left it at that. And I'm like, don't just leave us hanging, man. Like, what peptides are there? What mental health conditions? And so, like, I asked him that, and again, but Huberman, if you're watching this, I'm wanting answers.
If you're watching this and he found out, he would full on pass out, just like completely in the chair on the ground. Well, that's all we have today for you folks.
Yeah. So that being said, if you're gonna go to one of these live events, come with questions prepared, and don't be afraid to ask the questions all the way throughout. I think that one of my issues is that I waited until the very end. But it's because I wanted, just like you were saying, I wanted to be very present. Like I wanted to not miss a single thing. And, I think that other people were just like punching in the questions all the way through. And
so, that's fair. Well, here's a question for you. How do you feel like comparatively, like all the Huberman episodes you've listened to compared to this live event and all the things that you've learned just from listening to the podcast compared to this? Like, how do you feel like it compares and like everything that you learned during that live event? Does that question make sense? Because I'm sure it's a little bit hard to quantify because you probably listened to hundreds.
I think I've listened to every single one except for the most recent ones. So there's like 300 of them, I think. And the two most recent ones, he interviewed Chris Voss. I haven't listened to that one yet, and I haven't listened to his one about willpower, but they're on my list.
Okay, I believe you, and I love that you know exactly what they are. So all of the things that you've learned from, hundreds of episodes. And did you feel like you walked away from this event like learning so much, just like you do in listening to his podcast? Or did it feel a bit more like kind of a glimpse into who Huberman is?
I think it's the latter. If you are an avid listener to the Huberman Lab podcast, there honestly is not a ton of new information that he covers.
Okay.
But there's more of an insight on who he is and how
Okay.
he addresses things, and these unique stories that kind of inform. And really what it is, like I said, my brother went with me, and he is an engineer, right? In fact, actually, he was the lead engineer for the Sears Tower at one point for a project that they were doing.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyways, but like he's very logical, and he wants things to be structured in a specific way. And whereas us, we just are like, all right, let's just
Questions for the interview? What questions? Posh. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but essentially, if you enjoy his podcast and you're the type of thinker that's like, yeah, let's just see where this
Let's
goes.
just explore.
Like, it's a wonderful experience to
Okay.
just be able to see his mind at work and be able to see him go down all these avenues and get distracted by, this story and this story, and like talking about things that genuinely excite him, which is really, really cool.
Sounds like it was an experience to just like sit and witness a conversation with Huberman, whereas his podcasts are probably much more structured.
Yeah.
And like I'm sure there's times where he even is reading literally notes that he took so that he doesn't get off topic too much because he has an hour.
Exactly. Well, and his cast and crew are always like, okay, you've got
Yeah.
this much time.
Stop, sir.
And he's like, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to keep going. And that's why he has 3 hour
later.
episodes. Yeah, exactly. So there was actually a little bit of crowd work that he did. He only did crowd work with one person because he lost a bet with Lex Friedman, I guess, doing something. So he's like, okay, I'm going to call out to some random person in the crowd, and I'm like, please, over here, please pick me. Picks this random guy, and he's like, I want you to give me a random body part. And the guy, instead of saying a body part, he's like, why haven't you interviewed any chiropractors on your podcast? It's just like, he's like, I haven't interviewed any yet. And then he went on to a whole spiel about like chiropractors and having to do this really weird maneuver, like doing a strange thing to a wall.
What?
But like,
Guess you had to be there.
But yeah, but it apparently fixed one of his back problems. And
Oh, wow.
Anyways, random thing, and he's like, oh yeah, body part chiropractor. Okay, and then he moved on from there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's going to do any more crowd work in the future based
That
on
went
that
south.
interaction.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for ruining it, whoever you were.
But no, it was very cool, and like being able to be there, and obviously like I think the big thing that a lot of people show up to those for is for the Q&A. And so to be able to see him answer those, like I think one of the really cool questions that he answered was like, the Huberman Lab podcast has like an immense reach. It's affected millions of people. And then it turned the question back on him. How has the podcast like changed you?
That's a good question.
And like he just like it completely caught him off guard, and he was like, I just got to say like that it's made me immensely grateful that I have a platform to do what I absolutely love, that I've loved ever since I was just a kid.
I was just going to say, from the elementary school classroom, learning and sharing. Now he gets to do it on this massive scale.
Massive scale.
That's so cool.
Well, and it's like, I feel like I think he probably still is a child, and like I like in his heart of hearts, I think he's just a little kid.
Curious child.
Yeah, and it's because another person asked him, like, what do you do for fun? He's like, well, besides the podcast, and he's like really stumped, and like he
just loves it so much. That is his fun.
That's his fun. But he was like, yeah, I mean, maybe I was like in a pool and I saw a frog, and I was thinking about what it would be like to be that frog. And like I was like becoming the frog, and I'm just like, man, Andrew, you're freaking hilarious, man. I actually sent him a little video. There's like this little video of a frog that's like in this pond that's making this chirping noise, and it like creates this amazing like resonance frequency on the pond itself.
It looks like it's playing.
Well, no, more so it's just sitting there, but it's like these I don't know if you've ever seen like
the
sound
ripples?
waves.
Yeah.
It's like it was making these perfect sound waves. I'm like, that's so cool. So I sent it to him, and
well, for all we know, that frog was playing.
maybe
Yeah.
it probably was.
the Andrew Huberman of the frog world, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, I'm so glad that you had a chance to go. Like, not many people have an opportunity to like see their heroes,
Yeah,
live like that.
Yeah.
So what a cool experience.
it was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe one day we'll be cool enough that we can have him on our podcast.
maybe.
That's literally the entire reason Derek does this
That's
podcast
it.
in the first
That's
place. Everyone is just for the hope that one day Andrew Huberman could be in our chair.
That'd be incredible.
That would be crazy.
That'd be incredible.
You would just not be. You'd just be sitting there like, and I'd have to do all the questions.
Ignore him.
I just get your chair and just
Just
wheel
wheel
you
me
out.
out. Yeah,
And you're just like
exactly.
frozen.
No, wait. Come back. I love you.
As you fade away down the hallway. I love you.
Oh my god.
This has been a fun one to do. We'll have to do this more.
Yeah, I think this is really good.
There's so many notes here, that we
There
didn't
are.
even begin to go over, but I think it's cool for people to understand the difference between experiencing his podcast versus the live event. But it sounds like if anyone's a huge fan, that it would be a really cool thing to go to.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely worth it. And like for me, like I was debating whether I wanted to do just the regular ticket or like the VIP ticket, and I went full in. I'm just like, I want to get as close as possible, so that way I can like have eye contact. And I don't think he ever made eye contact with him, but I was like right there at the foot of the stage. I'm like, this is incredible. It was absolutely.
But if you haven't listened to every single episode ever, like Derek has, then you probably would learn a lot from going to the live event, though.
Yeah, well, and to like the VIP, I'm trying to think. That's the other question that a lot of people had. Like, what did the VIP experience include? I think it came with like a poster. There's like a signed journal notebook where you can use it for whatever, and then actually came with a couple of posters. And so now in the back of my office on my video calls, there's Andrew Huberman sitting there watching over my shoulder.
No, he's always with you.
That's right. So I would say though, like if people are wondering, is it worth it to go? I would say if you're a big fan of Andrew Huberman and his work, I would say definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely worth it.
And get the chicken. If it's in Chicago.
Yeah, if it's in Chicago. Check out Nando's Chicken. Tell me if it's overrated. It's not.
No, don't tell him if it's overrated.
It's
he doesn't
not.
want to hear. If you think it's overrated, just don't at him.
That's right.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience with us today, Derek. I think I'm just mostly just super stoked for you that you got to go.
It was a great time.
I'm a little jealous. I'm not as big a fan, but I think it would have been a really cool experience. So, yeah.
Well, if he ever does one, I know that he went by Seattle at one point. If he ever goes up to Seattle again, we should definitely go.
We can call it research for the podcast, right? So it's technically a work trip.
Yeah, I think so.
Love this idea. I think it's going to get approved for sure.
For sure. Very cool.